She disrespected me, Lucas said, voice sharp and full of entitlement. That's why I slapped her. 3 times. He stood at the far end of the table, jaw tight, like he expected an apology for what he had done. I sat at the head, my fingers tightening around the handle of my fork until the metal dug into my palm. The first slap had stunned me. The second made Isla jerk so hard her chair scraped against the hardwood floor. The third, that one left her breathing in short, panicked bursts. Her eyes fixed somewhere near the tablecloth, as though looking up might break her open completely. Then Celia clapped. A neat, composed rhythm, like she was applauding a performance she had seen many times before. That's how she learns to behave, she said, smiling as if she were offering a compliment about the meal. For a moment, all I could hear was the blood pounding in my ears. The roasted chicken in the center of the table still steamed. The candles flickered. The world remained unchanged, as if the violence hadn't torn a hole straight through the evening. Lucas took his seat again, adjusting his napkin like nothing had happened. No one moved to comfort my daughter. No one even looked at her. I pushed my chair back slowly. The legs barely made a sound. "Mireia, sit down," Celia said, without looking at me. "Drama only makes her worse." I didn't answer. I walked toward the hallway, each step measured steady. My hands were steady, too steadier than they had been in months. I took my phone from my coat pocket and hit a number I never thought I'd need again. "Reeves," a voice answered. "Activate level 2, I said quietly. "I need eyes, and I need them now." There was a brief pause on the line, then a simple reply. "Understood." I turned back toward the dining room, the shadows stretching long across the floor, knowing this was only the beginning of what had to come next. The table was set like a magazine cover, white linen, polished silver, heavy plates, with a scalloped edge I recognized from Isela's wedding registry. Lucas insisted on grilling steaks himself, even though the kitchen reeked of burnt rosemary and showmanship. Celia had brought her signature wine. A bottle she kept mentioning was twice what normal people pay. And through it all, Isela smiled the way women smile when there are cameras or consequences. She wore long sleeves, in May, in a house without air conditioning. She said she'd been cold lately, but I saw how she held her elbow as if it hurt to lift the knife. She pushed her food around. She barely drank her wine. Her voice when she spoke came out smaller than I remembered. Lucas filled the silence with noise, talking about his new client's real estate deals, some coastal property in Baja he wanted to flip. Celia corrected him twice and cut me off every time I opened my mouth. "So how's retirement, Mireia?" she asked with a tight-lipped smile. "Must be boring going from courtrooms to crossword puzzles." I ignored her. I watched Isela. I noticed how she startled when Lucas reached for the salt. I noticed how she never made eye contact with him. The slap came during dessert. Lucas said something about Isela forgetting to fold the laundry. She mumbled an apology. He hit her. Then again. Then again. And Celia clapped. My body reacted before my mind caught up. I excused myself, calmly walked down the hallway to the guest bathroom and closed the door. My heart wasn't racing. It should have been. But after 2 decades in courtrooms listening to men justify bruises, I had learned how to make myself still when I needed to be fast. I opened the app Reeves had built me years ago when I was handling threats tied to federal sentencing. A button marked Level 2, Witness Activated, glowed red. I tapped it. Recording began. The walls were thin. Their voices carried. Everything they said from this point on would be preserved minute by minute until I decided it was time to stop listening and start acting. Before I was anyone's mother, I was a federal judge. 19 years in the same courtroom, presiding over cases most people only read about human trafficking networks. spanning states, shell companies, hiding financial abuse families, where the bruises weren't always on skin. I sat beneath that SIL week after week, listening to men speak in flat practice tones about the women they broke. They all started the same way. First came the charm, then came the rules, then came the isolation. And finally, by the time anyone noticed, there were no bank accounts, no job, no friends, no name. Control doesn't arrive in a hurricane. It comes in drafts, small, quiet, legal. I saw it in Isela's life. Not all at once. But gradually, the pieces shifted. She stopped calling just to talk. Her responses got shorter. She said we more than I, and when I asked if everything was all right, she always said, "He's just stressed." That's how victims talk. And I had trained myself for years to hear what wasn't said. Still, when I retired, I made her a promise. No more looking into people, no more second-guessing. She deserved space to live her own life without feeling like I was cross-examining every decision. So I let things slide. I stopped asking questions. And now my daughter had been hit. In my presence. And no one batted an eye. Maybe I had stepped back too far. Back in my guest room that night, I replayed the audio. Lucas's voice was low, controlled. Celia's tone was clinical. "You've made her weak," she said. "If you keep letting her cry, she'll start thinking she's the one who's been wronged." And then Lucas. "Next time I'm locking her out." I used to love visiting my daughter's home. Back when she lived in a cramped condo with mismatched mugs and a dying houseplant on the sill, the space still felt alive, books, stacked sideways photos, tacked onto the fridge music, always humming from another room. Now the house echoed. Too clean, too quiet. The photos were all gone, no college friends, no childhood snapshots. Just a generic portrait of Lucas's late father above the fireplace. No mirrors, not even in the guest bathroom. The curtains stayed closed, even in daylight. When I asked why, Isela smiled, like she didn't hear the question. "It just feels more peaceful. This way," she said, hands curled tightly around a cold cup of tea. She used to love the sun. Celia arrived every Thursday at 10. She'd let herself in with a key carrying lemon oil polish and a day planner. She ran the house like a school. Rigid, quiet, perfect. When she left, Isela looked smaller. I started asking for documents under pretense I'm helping a neighbor contest a property line. "Can you remind me who you use for insurance?" Little things, soft questions. But the answers never had her name on them. I ran checks through 2 friends who owed me favors. The house deed Lucas only. The utilities Lucas and Celia. Joint bank accounts. None. Credit card. A single one authorized user only monthly limit capped. It wasn't just that Isela didn't own anything, she didn't exist on paper. That night, I sat in my own kitchen staring at the stack of printouts. Each one was like a fingerprint showing me exactly how thoroughly she'd been erased, one form at a time. Control through absence. Lucas had done it with precision. I didn't sleep. Instead, I opened an old file from years ago, notes from a domestic financial abuse case in Michigan. The patterns were identical. Except this time, it was my daughter. And this time, I still had access to every tool I needed to make them regret thinking she had none. I sat on the edge of my bed with the phone in my hand for nearly an hour before I dialed. Cynthia Reeves answered on the second ring. I told myself, "I'd never drag you into anything personal," I said. She didn't hesitate. "But you knew I'd come if it was Isela." I gave her everything, the recording, the documentation, the erased paper trail, the pattern. She didn't say much, just asked for names and dates. She still worked the same quiet, clean, relentless. Within 36 hours, she had surveillance in place. Lucas's business associates, Celia's calls, even the neighbors. She pulled every complaint filed in the last 10 years, linked to the Barrington name. Then she sent me a file I wasn't prepared for. Celia's husband, Lucas's father, had died 7 years ago. No obituary, no probate filing, no funeral records. Officially, it had been labeled a medical episode. Unofficially, it had been nothing. No investigation, no autopsy, no witness statements. Cynthia tracked down an old groundskeeper who'd worked for the family in Eastern Oregon. He remembered the man well, kind, forgetful, quiet. One day he was just gone. Celia said he'd left for treatment back east. He never came back. 3 months later, Celia sold the property and moved to Portland. No will was ever filed. His assets had transferred quietly. He didn't just disappear, Cynthia said. He was erased, just like Isola's being erased. I felt the air shift, not just fear, recognition. Celia hadn't just watched Lucas become what he was. She had shaped him. I thanked Cynthia and ended the call. My thumb pressed against the back of the phone until it hurt. They thought I was retired. They thought Isela was alone. They didn't understand that some things don't fade with time, like memory or instinct, or the cold certainty that history left unchecked will always repeat itself, and I wasn't going to let it. I showed up with a canvas tote of Isela's old research books and a soft knock at the door. Lucas opened it. His smile didn't reach his eyes. You didn't have to come all this way. I was already in the area. I lied. Just thought she might need these for the lab project. He let me in, barely hiding his impatience. I handed off the tote and walked slowly toward the foyer, slipping my phone into the coat pocket that hung loosely by the entryway mirror, one of the few reflective surfaces still remaining in the house. It was already recording. I won't stay, I said casually. Just wanted to see her face. He didn't call for her. He didn't move, just shrugged and turned toward the kitchen. The moment I got back in the car, I pulled out the phone and hit stop. The screen flashed. Recording saved. 37 minutes. Location tagged. Time marked. I drove home in silence, gripping the wheel tighter than I needed to. That night, I listened. The file began with soft conversation, then sharp tones rising in waves. Lucas's voice. You humiliated me in front of her. You think I don't see what you're doing? Isola's muffled broken. I didn't say anything. Then Celia. If she speaks to anyone, we shut her out completely. No money, no name, no support. Let her go cry to someone who'll care. Then a silence, and Isela's quiet sobbing. I listened to it 3 times. I didn't cry. I didn't pause. I forwarded the file to Cynthia and attached a single note. We move tomorrow. Restraining order prep. Include financial protection clause. I'll initiate conservatorship. Within the hour, she confirmed. Everything we needed was in place. The next morning, I packed a folder, put on a navy coat I hadn't worn in years, and drove to the courthouse to reclaim the name they thought they could take from my daughter without a fight. I arrived at the courthouse just after opening. I knew the clerk, different last name, now remarried. She glanced at the papers I slid across the counter, and her mouth tightened. Emergency petition? Yes. Under the Family Protection Act, Section 14. She flipped through the file. You have authority. I handed over the power of attorney signed by Isola 6 years ago, when she had pneumonia so badly she couldn't walk from the bed to the kitchen. Still valid, I said. Still notarized. She didn't ask another question. I think she saw something in my face that told her this wasn't the kind of case you delay. By noon, the judge granted emergency conservatorship. By 2, we had a restraining order on Lucas and a property freeze approved by probate court pending full review. By 4, I'd signed off on the notice for removal. Isola was legally entitled to vacate the residence without further contact. The next morning, I waited down the block. The patrol cars arrived at 6:42 a.m. The front door opened. Lucas stepped outside in his undershirt, yelling something about harassment, screaming that it was his house. Celia came stumbling out in her robe, already dialing someone. But then I saw her. Isola. She stepped out barefoot. No suitcase, no purse. Just her keys and the sweater she used to wear in college sleeves pulled down to her knuckles. She didn't look back. Didn't speak. She walked to my car and opened the door. I didn't say anything, just started the engine. She didn't ask where we were going. We passed a gas station, a bakery, a church with a cracked bell. Her hands never stopped trembling. But when we pulled into my driveway and I handed her a cup of water, she held it steady. Then she asked, "Do I still have a bank account?" I opened the manila folder I'd brought from the courthouse. Inside were account transfers, protection orders, and the first form with her name alone, bold and centered at the top. Lucas's attorney tried to paint him as stressed, misunderstood, misquoted. He called the audio edited and the finances a mistake in filing. He blamed the slap on a cultural difference. Celia, when she took the stand, raised her voice so sharply the judge warned her twice. "This is a witch hunt," she shouted. "This woman has always hated us. She's weaponizing the system." I didn't speak. I sat 3 rows back, hands folded in my lap. The binder on the prosecution table was mine, meticulously labeled tabs, audio recording, deed transfers, medical treatment gaps, digital isolation logs, witness statements. Isola never had to testify. The judge read every page. Every moment we had documented was now on the record. The bruises on her ribs from 2 years ago. The email from her university account unsent, but drafted, "I think I'm being erased." The recording where Celia dictated how to freeze a partner out of her own home. The court took 3 days. Lucas was convicted of coercive control, domestic abuse, and financial fraud. 5 years minimum sentence served. Celia was charged with obstruction and perjury, 18 months, with probation restrictions afterward. I didn't stay for the sentencing statements. I left the moment the gavel came down. Outside, the wind lifted a corner of my scarf. I stood in the parking lot and looked up, not at the sky, but at the courthouse windows. I remembered all the women who'd once sat in that very seat, begging me to believe them. Now the evidence stood in their place. And this time, it was enough. When I got home, Isola was in the kitchen. She was cleaning out the spice rack. Something about the quiet rhythm of her hands tossing out what had expired made me pause. She didn't look at me, but her voice was calm. "Can we go tomorrow? I want to see the apartment again." I nodded. It was time she saw the place that would finally be hers. Isola moved in on a Wednesday morning, the kind of morning that smells faintly of soil and fresh beginnings. The apartment was small, just 2 rooms and a kitchen, but it backed onto the arboretum. That mattered to her. She didn't bring much. A stack of notebooks, a potted fern she thought she'd killed years ago, and a photo of the 2 of us from when she graduated. She leaned the photo against the bookshelf without saying anything. By Friday, the windows were always open, even when the air turned brisk. She said it helped her breathe. That weekend we went together to the shelter. She didn't even look at the puppies. She went straight to the corner where an old terrier mix lay curled, one cloudy eye and a limp in his left leg. She knelt down and whispered, "You and me both." She named him Patch. He followed her from room to room like he was worried she'd vanish. She began humming again, just under her breath when she was drying dishes or folding laundry. I never said anything about it. I didn't want to scare the music back into hiding. Some days I'd find her sitting on the floor, eyes fixed on nothing, not crying, just still, like she was waiting for her body to catch up to her safety. I never interrupted. I brought groceries sometimes, left books on her porch. I walked Patch when she needed space. I didn't ask her to talk. I didn't bring up court. That part of our story was over. One afternoon, I found her rearranging the furniture not for practicality, but just to feel what it was like to choose where things belonged. She smiled at me. Not the thin, polite one, A real one. Real. I think I want to volunteer at the Arboretum, she said. Then she paused. Or maybe somewhere else. Somewhere louder. I nodded. She wasn't whispering anymore. She was learning how to take up sound again. And the next morning, she asked if she could speak at the final hearing. The courtroom was quiet, not tense, but listening. Isla stood at the center just beyond the microphone hands at her sides. She hadn't brought notes. She hadn't asked me to look it over beforehand. I hadn't offered. Her voice was clear. Not loud, not performative, just sure. For a long time, she began, I thought if I stayed quiet, I could keep the peace. That if I didn't make waves, they wouldn't come crashing down on me. She looked at Lucas once then. Didn't look again. They told me how to talk, what to wear, when to eat, who I could see. It didn't feel like control at first, it felt like care. Like guidance. But that's how it starts. Not with bruises, with silence. I felt my hand close around the edge of the bench, not out of fear, out of awe. They removed every trace of me, from our bank accounts, from the lease, from our mail, even from my own mind. I started believing I wasn't capable, that I was too sensitive, that I was the problem. She took one breath, let it steady her. This wasn't just pain, it was design. They rewrote who I was. Then she turned, just slightly. Her eyes met mine, but I remember now. I didn't move. I didn't cry. You helped me find my name again, she said. Not by pushing, by waiting, by knowing, and by never letting go of what I couldn't see yet. She sat down without another word. No applause, no murmurs, just the sound of the judge clearing his throat and asking the clerk to mark the statement for record. Outside, the sun was starting to dip, casting long shadows across the steps. Isla took my arm not to lean on, just to hold. We walked slowly, with no reason to rush. That night, she opened the folder with her new documents license lease, her own checking account. And on the final page, her name printed clearly at the top. Just hers. No one else's.